On their 40th wedding anniversary, the old father, thick-skinned and brazen, had invited his young mistress. The old mother had gotten angry and left immediately. The son, indignant on behalf of his mother, called his father an inhumane person. Fortunately, he had a way to handle it. He stepped forward, friendly, praising the girl's charm, saying she looked like a movie star. The girl was overjoyed, trying to guess a few movie titles herself, but they were all wrong. He said coldly, "That's the movie Deep Throat." The face of the young girl immediately changed, but this humiliation did not make the father feel any remorse whatsoever. One day, the mother tearfully said that the father had taken all the property in the house and left with that loose woman to find a new home. The son was once again angry to the point of red eyes, secretly cursing the father as a scoundrel. He brought a bottle of wine to the house, pretending to congratulate the two newlyweds. The father thought his son finally understood him, shamelessly boasting about the young girlfriend's sensual figure, saying his old train now had a new engine, and degrading the mother as a boring, old, and ugly person. The son listened, his eyes gradually directed towards the iron crowbar on the ground. When he stepped out of the room, his face was covered in blood. At this point, you might perhaps think that the son is different from his father, that he would surely be faithful to his wife and children. But completely the opposite, he was even worse and more wretched than his father. This movie is considered the peak of Tom Hardy's acting. His characteristic sneer has become a classic moment in film history. See how excellently he portrays the character of a scumbag. As soon as Freddy is released from prison, his best friend Jimmy comes to pick him up. Jimmy is both his cousin and Freddy's most loyal associate. Don't look at the shy appearance of Jimmy currently. Later you will realize he is a major potential factor. Freddy's wife was also home, dressed lavishly, and had hung a large banner welcoming him back. Outsiders looking in might perhaps think he had just achieved high success and returned home in glory. As soon as he reached the door, Freddy's wife rushed forward and hugged him tightly like a hungry wolf, saying she missed him very much. Freddy even hadn't had a chance to ask about his family when he dragged his wife into the room, completely ignoring the relatives standing outside the door. The sounds coming from inside the room were completely impossible to ignore. Freddy's wife hoped that after a few years in prison, Freddy would change and become a good man. But Freddy's father had asserted that a dog cannot change its eating habits, and he was right. Freddy then reluctantly dragged Maggie, also his wife's biological younger sister, and also Jimmy's girlfriend, out to dance, even putting his hands on inappropriate places. The world of Freddy seemed to have no rules whatsoever. Indeed, Freddy was still like before, not caring about his wife and children, constantly away from home, either having affairs with other women or getting drunk. Freddy's wife was again drowned in tears as before. Sadly, she was someone who valued love too much. Freddy only saw those girls as a casual fling. Maggie felt her sister had lost all hope. Freddy was not just a terrible person, but also a notorious cold-blooded gangster in the underworld. Before being released from prison, Freddy had received instructions from the underworld boss Ozzy, who was still in prison. Hearing that the gang's second-in-command was doing well outside, Ozzy wanted Freddy to warn him and see if he was overstepping his authority. Unexpectedly, the second-in-command had anticipated this early on. The very night Freddy was released, he gave Freddy a preemptive show of force. "Out here, I'm the boss. To survive here, you have to earn my respect." But Freddy was not someone easily controlled by others. He immediately walked away with an arrogant swagger, heading to the home of an old associate. Just because after Freddy went to prison, this person had embezzled his illicit money. His fury erupted, and Freddy beat his associate to a vegetative state. This terrified his subordinate Jimmy, because the associate was now the second-in-command's right-hand man. This time Freddy had caused a big problem. However, things were not as bad as predicted. The second-in-command summoned Freddy not to punish him, but on Ozzy's orders from prison, wanted the brothers to carry out a big job, robbing a bank. And the associate Freddy beat, who was in the hospital, would be replaced by Freddy himself. The messenger was Patricia, who was also Ozzy's biological sister. As soon as he saw that Patricia was somewhat beautiful, Freddy's familiar smirk appeared again. As he left, he didn't forget to glance back a few more times. Back to the main point. Although seemingly valued outwardly, Freddy still knew the second-in-command would find a way to eliminate him, either by using this job or by having him ambushed upon his return during the operation. So he wanted Jimmy to join the bank robbery, as Jimmy was the only person he trusted. But Jimmy was naturally timid and had never committed a crime. His girlfriend Maggie had a big fight with him about it. However, Jimmy was someone who valued brotherhood in distress. No matter what, he had to help. Maggie couldn't stop him. Unexpectedly, this very job would change Jimmy's fate and also alter their brotherhood. They all broke into the bank vault according to plan. Pay attention. Jimmy wore a green hat, while Freddy wore a yellow hat. The director had a specific intention. The story behind it would reveal itself. Initially, everything went smoothly. The second-in-command was too aggressive. He poured gasoline on the bank manager's head. The old manager was so scared he temporarily couldn't remember the vault password. At the crucial moment, Jimmy calmly and successfully hinted at the password to help the manager remember. He became the biggest success, but this didn't affect everyone's contempt for him. Jimmy was naturally timid. Everyone treated him like a clown for amusement, while he just laughed along naively. At this point, the second-in-command called Freddy aside. It turned out he wanted to settle the score regarding Freddy beating the associate and declared he would take all the money stolen by Freddy and Jimmy, also threatening that if Freddy made it back alive, that would be lucky enough. Upon hearing this, Freddy's face turned red with anger, his eyes welled up, and his gaze became distant. In his daze, he lit a cigarette. Jimmy also sensed something unusual in the atmosphere. He only saw Freddy smash a bottle of wine under the table, stumbling towards the second-in-command, who was still rambling on. The second-in-command fell. The other subordinates also trembled in fear at Freddy's ferocious expression and simultaneously lowered their weapons. But Ozzy in prison only wanted Freddy to intimidate the second-in-command. Freddy, however, took it upon himself to kill him. This time, he had really caused big trouble. He didn't dare to go back and report to Ozzy, instead telling Jimmy to go in his place. Ozzy caused trouble, and his subordinate paid the price. This wasn't the rule. But the surprising thing was that this meeting made Jimmy gain recognition. Don't be fooled by Jimmy's ordinary, unremarkable appearance. In reality, he was very smart and shrewd. Ozzy was originally very angry, but Jimmy quickly and cleverly mediated, saying that Freddy's ruthless action wasn't betrayal, but rather eliminating a threat for Ozzy. The second-in-command had long wanted to overthrow you to become the boss himself. Is that what all the rumors in the underworld say? Whether Jimmy was telling the truth or not, the suspicious Ozzy believed it at this moment. Furthermore, Ozzy also greatly praised Jimmy's performance in the bank robbery. So not only were the two brothers safe and sound, but they also rose up instantly, replacing the second-in-command to become the new person in charge, directly under Ozzy in prison. Just as Freddy's wife was about to give birth, the whole family prepared to go to the hospital. But the old mother wept uncontrollably. The old father, it turned out, had taken his wealth and left with a young mistress. At this moment, Freddy's eyes were again teary. He instructed Jimmy to take good care of their mother, and then went alone to the new house of his father and the mistress. Next was the opening scene we had already seen. At the same time the young mistress screamed, Freddy's wife also gave birth to a chubby baby boy. Freddy Jr. was officially born. 5 years passed quickly. After gaining his position, Freddy became even worse, spending his days partying outside, paying no attention to his family. The most unbelievable thing was that he was actually having an affair with Patricia, Ozzy's biological sister, and she was completely infatuated with Freddy's nonchalant attitude. Freddy's wife raised their 3 children alone, with tears in her eyes all day long. Her sister advised her to divorce, but she couldn't bring herself to. Without him, I'm nothing. That day, after comforting her sister, Maggie stayed overnight and didn't go home. Unexpectedly, Freddy returned home drunk in the middle of the night, saw a beautiful woman lying on the bed, and a sinister smile appeared as he staggered towards her. What are you doing? Just as Maggie didn't know how to handle the situation, Freddy's wife came out of the room in time. Although Maggie didn't tell Jimmy about this, their brotherhood was about to break down because of Freddy. Jimmy's turning point with Freddy started with the case of a group of Canadians selling ecstasy. Ozzy in prison sent the two brothers to negotiate with them. But Freddy, accustomed to his tyrannical ways in London, couldn't stand outsiders brazenly making money on his turf. In a fit of anger, he pulled out a gun and held the opponent's manager at gunpoint. Unexpectedly, the opponent's bodyguard was also an idiot. In his haste, he didn't care about his boss's life or death. After a direct confrontation, they were completely defeated. The two brothers also ran out of cash. The initial drug-dealing cooperation turned into a robbery. If we cooperate long-term, this money is just pocket change. Jimmy couldn't stand Freddy's incompetence anymore. What am I supposed to tell Ozzy in prison? Because Ozzy trusted Jimmy more than Freddy, it was always Jimmy who went to see Ozzy each time. Freddy couldn't help but be jealous. This was the first time Jimmy showed a cold attitude towards Freddy. The crack in their brotherhood began to appear. The next day, Jimmy met Ozzy. The clever Ozzy naturally wouldn't blame Jimmy, but would take this opportunity to divide the two brothers. After this incident, Ozzy further appreciated Jimmy's intelligence and vision, deciding to rescue the Canadians, giving all the drug-dealing business to Jimmy to manage, while Freddie would become a discarded pawn of the gang. This meant that Jimmy was no longer a mere subordinate as before. A heaven-sent opportunity, of course, he couldn't refuse. After leaving prison, Jimmy only told Freddie that he had sorted things out with Ozzy, but the drug-dealing business had collapsed. Finally, Freddie was relieved of a burden and smiled brightly. But the guilt of betrayal kept Jimmy from eating or sleeping well. After all, he had gotten to where he was today, thanks to Freddie's protection. If one day Freddie found out the truth, he would surely think that Jimmy had kicked him out of the game. Maggie was utterly fed up with Freddie's despicable actions towards her sister and herself. She said it was all his own doing. Jimmy and Maggie's engagement party was quickly held. Freddie took it upon himself to arrange a bachelor party for Jimmy, wanting him to enjoy his last moments of wild abandon. Jimmy said he was faithful to Maggie, but Freddie became even more reckless in his speech. Who knows, maybe Maggie is also holding hands with another guy? This excessive joke completely infuriated Jimmy. He angrily left, no longer wanting to tolerate this brother who never knew how to respect others. Freddie continued his affair with P, the underworld boss's sister. After one tryst, Patricia said, "Actually, the drug-dealing business didn't collapse. It's Jimmy who is handling all the drug business for Ozzy." Freddie couldn't believe Jimmy had betrayed him. That was the brother he had trusted the most since childhood. Jimmy and Maggie held their wedding. Now Freddie and Jimmy were not only cousins, but also had the added relationship of brother-in-law. Ozzy in prison sent his sister to announce a gift of a hair salon for Jimmy's wife. This made Freddie even more jealous. So he called Ozzy directly to confront him. Finally, Ozzy confessed to Freddie that not only was the drug business managed by Jimmy, but all of Ozzy's other businesses had also been handed over to Jimmy. Upon hearing this, Freddie angrily smashed the phone. The next day, he showed up uninvited at Jimmy's large-scale drug production facility. Jimmy even had his own private office. The awkwardness in the air turned into his bitter, sarcastic words. Words like betrayal, jealousy, envy, and hatred kept repeating in his head, making Freddie's hands tremble uncontrollably. But finally, everything exploded like a flood. "Don't be so naive, okay? Our brotherhood is over. Because you chose this path. Ozzy is using you, Jimmy, just like he used me to get someone killed. He's very good at that game." Perhaps what Freddie said afterwards was very reasonable, but Jimmy at this moment was no longer his subordinate. He exuded the aura of a gang boss. Freddie, conversely, looked like a wounded rabbit. His brother's betrayal seemed to make Freddie realize the failure of his life for the first time. Returning home, his son, as usual, begged him to stay. But this time, Freddie listened. He even helped his son change his wet pants. Realistically, his life was now a tangled mess. Freddie's wife took advantage of this rare moment of repentance to scold him for being away all the time, only going off with other women, and not being worthy of being a husband or father. The two began arguing fiercely. The two older daughters hid behind the door peeking, while the youngest son trembled in the corner. The final insensitive remark hurt Freddie once again. "It's also thanks to Jimmy. Otherwise, we would have starved long ago." Hearing Jimmy's name at this moment, Freddie felt like he would explode. So when Maggie rushed over, her sister had already been abused, her face bruised and swollen. Maggie once again advised her sister to divorce that terrible man. But whenever divorce was mentioned, the sister weakly turned to defend Freddie. "It's not his fault. I just said too much." She was truly beyond help. Upon hearing this, Maggie left immediately. She went to the bar where Freddie was sitting to defend her sister. During the confrontation, Freddie didn't back down and also started cursing Jimmy. Jimmy escorted his wife away, turning back to look at Freddie with a meaningful gaze. The confrontation between the two brothers officially began, and Freddie's revenge was also officially launched. That day, Jimmy planned to take his subordinates to the Netherlands to discuss a big business deal. That night, while Maggie was bathing in the tub, Freddie lost all humanity and suddenly burst in. This time no one else was home. Perhaps Maggie would find it hard to escape the devil's clutches. Freddie grabbed her hair and dragged Maggie out of the bathroom, committed rape, and even spat in her face. After he was done, he told Maggie that Jimmy had been very clean since he was little and didn't like others playing with his toys. Hearing these words, Maggie could only bury the humiliation deep within her heart. 9 months later, Maggie was close to her due date. The whole family gathered to celebrate the new year. As the countdown began, it seemed as though all unhappy things vanished. Freddie pretended to affectionately kiss Maggie's cheek. In reality, it was an act of claiming ownership of the baby in her womb. But Maggie was even more afraid of the truth being exposed than he was. Soon after, Maggie's son grew up and was named after his father, Jimmy Jr., but no one knew that Freddie was the baby's real father. The strange thing was that Freddie particularly doted on Jimmy Jr. on Jimmy Jr.'s birthday. He, as his uncle, brought a gift and showed full affection throughout the party, completely ignoring his own young biological son Freddie Jr., who was standing and watching nearby. Freddie Jr. touched his cousin's toy, and he immediately stopped him. Each word was like a needle piercing the boy's small heart. He didn't understand why his father loved his cousin more than he loved him. Just like that, on the soil of an angel, seeds of evil were about to sprout. Maggie wanted to hold Jimmy Jr., but Freddie acted outrageously. His eyes look like mine, don't they? Do you think we should have another one? Witnessing this was not only Freddie Jr., but also his mother, except she didn't hear the content of the conversation. Back home, Freddie Jr. locked himself in his room. His mother called out repeatedly but got no response, so she used his father as a threat. But the boy uttered a sentence that stunned the adults. "Dad doesn't need Mom anymore. You ugly old hag. Dad is planning to run away with Auntie." I heard him tell her exactly that. It turned out her previous suspicions were right. The woman immediately took her son and stormed straight into her sister's hair salon, as if carrying ironclad proof to punish her sister. Her bitter words were like sharp arrows. Because of a terrible husband, she had trampled upon their sisterly affection from the past. Maggie neither admitted nor denied it. While the adults were busy arguing, Freddie Jr. led Jimmy Jr. out of the hair salon. The two children crossed the road and walked a long way. The boy said he wanted to take Jimmy Jr. to see trains, but in reality, a wicked thought had arisen in his heart. "You like trains, right?" Fortunately, as the train was approaching, a patrol officer discovered them. The whole family was in a commotion. Finally, the two children were brought back. Freddie Sr. asked his son why he had taken his cousin away. Freddie Jr. lied, saying he didn't want to see his mother and aunt arguing. But in reality, the boy saw his cousin as the root cause of all family conflicts. And what the boy intended to do, only he himself knew. Even now, Freddie felt no remorse. His terrible actions had pushed the two families to the brink of the abyss. On the other side, Maggie was overjoyed after finding her son. She could never forget that night, the rape that Freddie had subjected her to. Every time she remembered, she felt disgusted. Thinking that her son carried such a stain, she couldn't love him wholeheartedly. Every time her husband Jimmy wanted intimacy, she would unconsciously resist. She was afraid that if she spoke out, she would lose her husband, so no matter how painful it was, she had to swallow it. Now that her son was back, Maggie regretted not having loved him sooner. Freddie lost all reason to bring Jimmy down. He decided to conspire with his mistress to assassinate Ozzy in prison. Unfortunately, the Turk they sent was too incompetent. Ozzy was hit by one knife thrust and immediately counterattacked, killing him. At the same time, Ozzy met with Jimmy's trusted lieutenant, brazenly recounting the details of raping Maggie and revealing that he was Jimmy Jr.'s biological father. The other person was momentarily unable to react to this shocking information. The underworld boss survived after being rescued. With his intelligence and cunning, Ozzy naturally knew who the mastermind behind it was. Jimmy initially thought it was the Turks fighting over territory. No matter how reckless Freddie was, he couldn't commit such a heinous act. But he was too naive. Ozzy warned Jimmy, "You're definitely the next target." He pulled him aside and told him his life philosophy. When you're cornered, you must be able to strike at those you love. On this side, the failed plan caused everyone to panic completely. Once Ozzy sought revenge, none of them would survive. But assassinating Ozzy now was out of the question. The only way was to directly kill Jimmy, who held Ozzy's power. And the only person who had an opportunity to approach Jimmy was Freddie. After all, they were both cousins and brothers-in-law. Although very jealous of Jimmy, Freddie had never considered using violence. But now he had no other choice. After a period of internal struggle, he decided to act on the day of his daughter's engagement. That would be when Jimmy was most off guard. Coincidentally, Jimmy and his subordinates also decided to kill Freddie on the day of his daughter's engagement. Jimmy believed that was also when Freddie would be most vulnerable. Early that morning, Freddie went to his mistress's place, only to find her hanging from the ceiling. It seemed the other side had acted first. He tried to suppress his devastation, returning to his car intending to take his son to his grandmother's house. Unexpectedly, Jimmy had the same intention. At the engagement party, Jimmy gave Freddie's daughter an expensive necklace. Although undercurrents were swirling, outwardly they were still a family. The sound of women laughing and talking echoed in their ears. The two brothers exchanged unspoken understandings, making small talk. Finally, both said they wanted to speak privately with the other. Time was running out. The two men solemnly walked out, each step carrying the grim determination of survivors. But before they could get out the door, their mother-in-law rushed over in a panic with bad news. Everyone immediately rushed back to the mother-in-law's house. The ambulance lights flashed coldly, and a figure silently retreated into the dark corner. When Maggie arrived, her son had stopped breathing. The baby had just begun to feel motherly love. Here's what happened. Freddy Jr., while his cousin was sleeping, put the plastic bag containing a toy excavator over his head. And that excavator was the gift Freddy Sr. had given Jimmy Jr. the day before. Freddy Jr. thought that if his cousin was no longer there, his father would love him wholeheartedly. But the child's innocence grew the wings of a demon. Jimmy Jr. lay in the morgue. The two men who had just been about to face off transformed their strength into pain in that moment. Jimmy thought Freddy was just feeling sympathy, but unexpectedly, his heart was also bleeding. Because he was Jimmy Jr.'s biological father. The father-in-law quietly came and told the two men that it was Freddy Jr. who had put the plastic bag over Jimmy Jr.'s head. In other words, Freddy's son had killed another one of his sons. Jimmy pulled out a gun intending to avenge his son. It's all your fault. He also became a murderer like you. Freddy told Jimmy to go ahead and shoot, but Jimmy couldn't pull the trigger at that moment. On a swing, Freddy found his son hiding, full of guilt. After taking his son home, he exploded in a rage. How could you kill Jimmy Jr.? He was so small. Pressed for answers, Freddy's son finally told the truth. Because you loved him more than you loved me. To avoid causing greater turmoil in the family, the father-in-law had hidden the plastic bag that killed Jimmy Jr. before others found it. In other words, besides the three men, no one knew that Freddy Jr. was the perpetrator. On the day of the funeral, Maggie was devastated and wept bitterly. Unconsciously, she looked towards Freddy. In the moment their eyes met, a third sharp gaze watched. As the curtain closed, invisible smoke and fire also spread. The whole family stared at Maggie, who seemed to have become a different person, worried about her. Jimmy finally challenged Freddy once more. It's time to settle everything. The strange thing was that among his three children, Freddy had never seemed to care about any of them. Conversely, the child born out of wedlock made him shed crocodile tears. He shamelessly approached Maggie, saying he had a responsibility to share her pain. But the person Maggie wanted to see least at this moment was Freddy. Freddy went alone to a bar and drank until he was completely drunk. On the other side, Jimmy had begun hunting down the Turkish subordinates one by one. This was the first time he had killed someone, signaling a new chapter in his underworld career. Early in the morning, Freddy's wife was woken up by his noise. Freddy was so drunk he looked inhuman, laughing one moment, crying the next. He confessed that Jimmy would kill him and told his wife to quickly take their son and hide as far away as possible. Freddy Jr. killed little Jimmy Jr. Hearing these words, Freddy's wife didn't scold him at all. Instead, she ran off once again to confront her sister, accusing Maggie of stealing her husband. Maggie was forced to tell the truth. Freddy raped you. But sadly, the sister completely didn't believe her at this moment. On the other side, no matter how terrible Freddy was, he ultimately fulfilled the last responsibility of a father. He knew Jimmy would sooner or later find his son for revenge, so he told his mother to hide Freddy Jr. as far away as possible. Jimmy had eliminated all of his Turkish accomplices. This showdown certainly had no turning back. But before facing the confrontation, Freddy had one more thing to do. Just as he stopped his car, his wife caught him coming out of the hair salon, so she quietly followed behind. He came to express to Maggie that he was suffering just like her. I just want to be by your side, to share it with you. I love the little boy very much. Maggie, of course, didn't need his concern, saying frankly, he is the toxic tumor that killed everyone. Seeing that he received no sympathy and was further insulted, Freddy angrily reverted to his true self, threatening to tell Jimmy everything. A nearly dramatic scene occurred in an unbelievable way. The scissors struck a major artery. Just then, Freddy's wife had followed them there, but she was mentally prepared to stand outside the door. No matter how much Freddy begged for help, his wife remained indifferent. The two women, who had only known how to compromise with reality, had finally steeled their hearts, watching the man who had dragged them down into the mud take his last breath. On this side, Jimmy had cleaned up the battlefield, waiting for Freddy. But unfortunately, Freddy had vanished into thin air. A few months later, the two sisters met again. Maggie was pregnant again. The sister had cut her hair short. There was no longer any terrible man burdening her. Completely changed in appearance, spirit, everything had become better. It was just that when Maggie kindly asked where her sister and Freddy Jr. had moved to, the sisters still refused to reveal it. In reality, even now, Maggie still didn't know the truth about Jimmy Jr.'s death. On the other side, Jimmy met Ozzy in prison. Ozzy claimed to have good news. He was about to be released from prison. After getting out, he would definitely give Jimmy a position of importance. However, Jimmy was no longer the weak man who just obeyed orders as before. Since Freddy was missing, he thought Ozzy didn't trust him and had found someone else to eliminate Freddy. Looking at the fates of the second-in-command and Freddy, he realized the truth of the saying, when the cunning rabbit is caught, the hunting dog is slaughtered. Just like Freddy's warning from that year. He's using you, Jimmy, just like he used me to get someone killed. Now he would no longer believe Ozzy's sweet, deceptive words. The old fox saw the situation was unfavorable and immediately switched to an emotional approach. You're breaking my heart, Jimmy. Not long after, one morning as the dawn played a melodious tune, Jimmy sliced delicious vegetables and fruits. His beautiful wife wished him a good day. In prison, his assassin had also acted. From now on, life would surely be happy. No one would order him around anymore. He was the lord of the entire London area. It was just that when his wife said she couldn't get her sister's address, a hint of disappointment flickered in his eyes. Here, the film ends. Today's story ends here. Thank you for watching. What do you think of this film? Please leave a comment below.